Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I work for FMC. We're the folks that make Talstar. We make Scion, our newest product. We make CB aerosols. We make the Talstar granules, things like that. The first thing I need to do is say thank you to everybody for the use of our products. We really appreciate it. That's what makes these things possible. So thank you for your support in the field. We really appreciate that. One of the things that we take serious at FMC is safety. We take it so seriously that anytime we get on a presentation like this or together on a call or anything in person, whatever it may be, we do what's called a safety share. Now, a safety share is something pretty simple, doesn't have to be complicated or anything like that. What we do, or what our intent is to bring safety top of mind when you're out and about, and that's what I've got here. So what I'm going to talk about on my safety share today is tips to ease eye strain. I have spent more time, as I'm certain a lot of other people have, on their computers for the past few years than I ever thought possible. And with that, I have suffered from eye strain, okay, digital eye strain. So there's some things I want to throw out there that I want you to think about if you're using your electronic devices frequently that can help you overcome some of this. First thing I want to talk about is sit at least arm's length, about 25 inches from your screen. Follow the 20-20-20 rule, and if you don't know what that is, we're going to talk about it in just a second. One of the other things to do is adjust your room lighting. Make sure you increase contrast so it's more crisp and clear. That's always hugely important. Use artificial tears to refresh your eyes. That's one thing that I found out when I was spending so much time in front of the screen that I did need to do. And then the one thing that I do want to talk about is that 20-20-20 rule. So what is it? Well, the 20-20-20 rule is an easy way to help mitigate the effects of digital eye strain. Essentially, after 20 minutes of using an electronic device, you should look at something at least 20 feet away for a minimum of 20 seconds. 20-20-20. Takes about 20 seconds for your eyes to relax. So that's important. That I think you will find will help ease some of this digital eye strain. Make sure that you keep your body hydrated, things like that. All of these things will help you to overcome digital eye strain. So keep that in mind when you're out there. Remember that 20-20-20 rule to reduce the effects of digital eye strain. I think you'll find it very helpful. It's helped me in the past. And then the last thing I'll say about safety is that, with safety, we need to be constantly vigilant with it when we're out and about. And I guess the easy way for me and the quickest way for me to emphasize that is everybody needs to get home at night. And to do that, you have to think safety when you're out in the field. So make that part of your culture. I can tell you right now, I never really thought a lot about safety, but in my 12 years at FMC, I now think about things that what's the final effect in this? And it's all about being safe out there. So get home, everybody, get home, especially this weekend, big holiday weekend. So there's the safety share for you. All right, what do we got going on today? Well, we got some objectives and some outcomes. We're going to do this presentation. The objective of it is develop an understanding of basic flea biology, how fleas function and thrive, current control measures. We're going to touch on those. And then the one thing that I think that we really don't do well sometimes is we have to make the effort to secure customer help and satisfaction. And that's the big thing that a lot of times I see in flea control. That's the missing component. And then we're also going to talk really quickly about the biology of key tick species. Ticks have really, I get twice as many calls, 3 times as many calls the last few years on tick situations. They are a public health risk. They need to be respected. We're going to talk about some of the best management practices and things of that nature, and just understanding some of the biology of ticks. What I hope the outcome of all of this is to provide your customers with a value-added service. I think that's hugely important. That's something we need to do a better job of, is pointing that out to your customers. And then what that boils down to is a more satisfied customer. That all equates to increased sales and profit for you. And that's what this is about. Okay, that's what this is all about. So hopefully I give you a couple of tools that are going to help you when you're out in the field. All right, let's jump into this. How about we'll start with fleas. Well, fleas are I've been around a long time. Fleas used to be, fleas over my course in pest management. They were very prominent. Then there was a small decline in it. But the last few years, there's actually been what I call, in some cases, like a resurgence. And it's all has to do with understanding. Remember that fleas are wingless insects. They do not have wings. They're flattened. As I like to say, there's a reason for that biologically. We'll touch on it. There's about 2,000 species. 95% of that 2,000 species occur on mammals, actually have blood. Okay, they are blood feeders. And then about 5% of those species occur on birds. And anybody that's ever encountered any type of bird, flea situations, they're interesting, and you got to be on your toes with them. But I'm going to kind of focus on that 95%. Fleas can infest cats, dogs, humans, rodents, birds, host of other domestic and wild animals. And when they get in structures, close to structures, then you can easily have transfer. And that's what we need to realize. There's about 5 species of fleas. I'm not going to say the scientific names because I'll screw them up. It's Thursday. I don't want to go there. But, cat flea, dog flea, the human flea, and it's commonly found on swine. The stick-tight chicken flea, that's another one. Anybody that has any contact or does any service work with some of these poultry barns, things like that. And then the Oriental rat flea, and the reason I threw this one in there is, this is a carrier of bubonic plague and things of that nature. And if you follow the news lately, there's been some changes out in California, and there were actually some increased instances of bubonic plague, which is probably because, caused by this Oriental rat flea. But most of what we deal with when we're out in the field has to do with that cat flea. Okay. Most common flea in the United States, variable host. It's not very specific. In a lot of cases, you do have wildlife reservoirs that include possum, rabbit, raccoons, weasels, badgers, things of that nature. The primary host tends to be cats and dogs. Then humans, we tend to be secondary host, as some of those other animals are. But these fleas, they're ectoparasites. They get on a host, they stay on a host, and that's very important in this. And I'll try to connect some dots as we move along here. One of the things that we need to pay attention to is temperature and humidity. They're really important in development. We're going to go through the life stages here in just a minute. Relative humidity of about 75% and temperature, let's say 70 to 90 degrees. So the sweet spot being 80, that's ideal. Those are the contributing factors for the growth of the flea population. Okay. And so those are the things that we need to know when we're going into a situation and understand the connectivity to it all. Cat flea life cycle, I'm from the old school entomology, training as far as that goes. So this is a complete life cycle. You got the egg, larvae, pupae, adult, 4 distinct life stages. Okay. What I do want you to see or to understand, and the reason I put it in here, is when you get a phone call about a flea problem, when you go out, what do they normally see? Well, they're seeing adults, and adults only make up about 1% of a total population. Okay. So, when they say they're seeing adults, and if they're seeing a lot of adults, you've got to actually step back and understand how this population works. And that's what the, the triangle is here. Egg, larvae, that makes up a huge portion of this. And we'll talk about it a little later, but, Gary touched on it in his presentation. What is, we can get effective control of these, but if we want to extend our control or make it better by using IGRs, okay, for instance, then look what we get to do, okay? So if I take egg, larvae, and adults, I basically get a shot at about 80% of this population. That cocoon stage is very protective. So it's very, very difficult to get them and affect them once they're in that stage, okay? So, understand this population when you get that flea call. Because if they're saying, oh, we've got lots of adults, then just think what the dynamic is on this total population. And that's something that, I think you'll find very helpful. As far as the flea life cycle is concerned, 3 to 4 weeks under average conditions. If you hit the sweet spots, 80 degrees, about 75 degrees, something like that, or 80% humidity, sorry about that, humidity, then you're going to turn it a little faster. As far as range, 14 to 190 days for full maturity. So if you hit those sweet spots, you can turn them fast. And we talked about the temperature and the humidity and how important they are in these development stages. As far as the flea egg is concerned, most flea eggs hatch at about 80 degrees, 70 to 90 being the range, and then about 75% relative humidity. All of that is the range that they're looking for and they need for that development on the egg. Okay. As far as the egg itself, it's about 0.3 to 0.5 millimeters, small pearly white ovals. And these eggs are laid while the female flea is on the host. Okay. So I want you to connect this dot. That flea pretty much stays on that host. And if where the flea eggs are going to come off of that host is going to be where the pet rests. So it's critical in inspection and discussion and engagement with your customer that you find this information out, okay? So eggs generally drop within 3 to 8 hours. They'll typically hatch in 1 to 10 days. They're looking for that prime range, okay? What to also remember about flea eggs is they won't hatch if the temperature is below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And they're actually killed when it's above 95. So they really like that sweet spot. And if you're below 70 degrees, it takes a little longer. If you're above 90 degrees, you're right there on the edge of that egg being non-viable. So those are things to keep into consideration when you're there at your accounts. As far as flea larvae is concerned, I call it it looks like the flea larval stage looks like a spiny earthworm. As far as that goes, it's about 1/4 inch long. It doesn't have any legs, but it's got a big mouth. And it's got a big mouth because it consumes. It starts out white, but as it feeds on the adult feces, which is the main food source, you will see it. It's the dried up fecal, dried blood, let's say, from the adult. It turns a brown color. So the other point to remember here is these flea larvae want to feed on the adult flea feces because that's how they receive their nutrition. There's about 3 instars in the flea larval stages. Takes anywhere from 1 to 5 weeks. Once again, where's those prime spots? Temperature and humidity. They are very susceptible to desiccation. They must have humidity to live. They're going to tend to be in what I call shaded type areas. So they tend to develop in these darker areas, around under furniture, carpeting, back in protected areas, under pet houses, around pet houses, under porches, decks, trees, shrubs. I'll say it again, wherever pets rest, okay? You've got to find that out. because that's where fleas are going to be. That's where these larvae are going to be. And remember, this egg stage and larval stage is a huge portion of the total population of the flea, okay, infestation that you have. And then once it gets into that third instar, it's going to migrate to a protected area, a shaded area once again, and then it's going to start to spin this whitish cocoon around itself. And then that's the portion of the flea life cycle that's most difficult to control. So, there's that spiny earthworm, as I like to say. Notice the coloration, because this one has been feeding on adult feces, adult flea feces. So it picks up that darker color, very, whitish, translucent in the beginning, but as it feeds, it picks up the color. Now, the pupal stage, as far as that's concerned, about 5 millimeters long. They're white, silken, sticky cocoons. That's interesting and good to know. And what that does is that allows them to pick up material in their environment as they, when they spin this cocoon, it's sticky. So they start to pick up that material that's in that environment, and that helps to protect them. That's why it's so difficult to control them when they're in this stage. Now, you can get, how long does it take for them to come out? Anywhere from a week to 6 months, can be a little shorter. But the thing to remember here is they can extend this life stage. And when is it most advantageous to come out? That's the big thing. My favorite here is you'll get somebody, I've been involved in some apartment situations and things like that, and the apartment management will say, oh, well, we'll take that room out of service. We'll wait them out. Well, these can hang on, so keep that in mind. Those environmental conditions, once again, impact the emergence. Once these are ready to pop, okay, or come out, it requires certain stimulations, such as vibrations, direct pressures, things of that nature, increased temperature, humidity, CO2. Isn't it funny how CO2 pops up in a lot of things we find out about now, bed bugs, mosquitoes, things like that. But, that I went down the rabbit hole. Sorry about that. And then even light intensity has an effect on this. But when you put these stimulations together, that's what causes or triggers the release, okay, on the flea pupal stage. Now, one of the things that I think we overlook sometimes is the pupal window. And the reason I say that is we need to communicate this really well to our customers, because they think once we come in, do a treatment, they're no longer going to see any fleas. Well, that protected stage, and you get these stimulations, they're going to continue to release. So you've got to communicate that, and you need to tell customers that they will see emergence from anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks after you treat, but allow the products that you use to do their job. And quite often this is perceived as a treatment failure, but it's understanding that pyramid in this pupal window. And we need to communicate that to customers. Do they listen all the time? Can't say that they do, but we have to be passing good information, and that's part of it. There you see the cat flea cocoons and pupae, few days, maybe a few weeks, and you get that. But notice the accumulation of material on it, and that helps to protect these pupal the fleas that are in that pupal stage. So that's what makes these very difficult to control, and that's something we have to do. So remember that pupal window. As far as the adult flea, it emerges from the cocoon and then immediately begins host seeking. And newly emerged fleas are the ones most likely to bite humans because they are looking for a blood meal. When they release, they're looking for that blood meal. They are a permanent resident of the host. Average lifespan is about 113 days. So, 100 days, something like that, a little over 3 months. They are metabolically dependent on blood. They can survive a few weeks, okay, before the initial blood meal, but after feeding, they've got to have it. So they die if they don't get that blood meal within, let's say, 4 days, something like that, if they can't feed again. So, you know, this is interesting stuff here. And so, you know, if somebody's been on vacation and we've had a little pupil window release, and then they walk in, guess what? Wow, it's like a magnet. All of a sudden, the adult fleas are looking for that blood meal. And a lot of times that's what triggers a phone call for you guys. You know, they, you know, as they feed, they are, they're defecating the digested blood. And it's on a host, but it falls off the host, and it can be in the area where the pet rests. Hence, that ties together the development, you know, egg, larvae, pupae, you know, the whole 9 yards on a flea population. That's hugely important. You know, they lay the eggs on the host. Now, these eggs are not sticky. They will fall off. So it's important to understand that. And really and truly, you know, adult fleas are susceptible to insecticides. It's formulations and labels that dictate what may be more successful for you. And I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna advocate certain products or anything like that, but it's understanding how you can do your best job. And then the other thing is, we also need to make sure that our customers have, if they have pets, make sure that they're treated, groomed, you know, as far as that goes, because all of this as a collection, you know, is what I call the IPM approach. You're going to have the pet treated, we're going to treat the area, then we're going to keep the dog groomed, we're going to keep up with things. All of this entails a good IPM approach to flea control. And that's what you're doing. Here you see the flea moving through, you know, on the hairs. They like the hairs. That flea is built so it can move through the hairs on the body of their host and things of that nature. And, you know, you see on the one on the left there, that's the droppings. You see a few eggs and things like that. And that material will drop off and those eggs will fall off, but it's normally where that pet rests as far as that goes. So just to give you an idea about a flea population really quick, under ideal conditions, you know, 75% humidity, 80 degrees, something like that, 10 female fleas can produce 90,000 eggs in 30 days. So that gives you where this can go, so to speak, you know, and how these populations can grow. And then remember, once again, remember this triangle on what that population actually looks like. All right. You see the adults, but there is so much more going on from the egg, the larval, and that cocoon stage. And we need to be aware of that and communicating that to customers as far as that goes. So with that being said, we've done a little bit on fleas. Let's do a little bit on ticks. Well, you know, why are we seeing more ticks? Well, it clearly has to do with, you know, a big part of this is forest fragmentation, things of this nature. We are moving into rural areas. You know, we're taking urban into rural. And when you do that, you're going to have exposure to more of these things, such as ticks and things like that. So, you know, that's the reason why we're seeing it. Now, we've got an introduced species, you know, of ticks and things like that we're going to touch on here in a minute. So there's other reasons, but one of the biggest is we're moving into rural areas, and that's going to expose us more to it. Now, there's about 3 different types of tick life cycles, and I'm going to go over these really, really quick. One host ticks. Now, this is common. It's important to animal health. This one tick, one host tick, wow, easy for me to say today, they remain on the same single host for the larval, the nymphal, and the adult stages. So it finds, and it's generally only incidental with humans. This normally is what I call larger animals, something maybe like a cow or something like that, you know, as far as that goes. There are some species of this out there. We don't bump into them quite as much. There is the 2 host ticks, and they are out there. They'll often live for 2 years. The larvae often feed on smaller hosts, such as a rabbit. All right. Then they come off that host. They'll go into what we call molt at that point in time into nymphs. The larvae molt into nymphs on that first host. Then they fall off, okay? That normally happens spring is when they get on the host. Then they go through summer and fall. They leave that first host. And then they'll find in the next spring, they'll find the larger host. That usually adult ticks normally favor larger hosts, cows, deer, things of that nature. All right. And then there's the 3-host ticks. Now, you know, if we didn't think our job was hard enough on the first two, bam, here's this one. They often live for 3 years. The larvae are the first host to molt. They'll get on a smaller animal, such as squirrel. Then those, you know, those will fall off. That happens in the spring, fall off in the fall. Then they'll overwinter as a nymph, okay? Then that nymph will actually get onto a slightly larger animal in the spring of the next year, and it molts into, you know, the adult after leaving the second host in the fall. And then the next year in the spring, it will find the larger animals, okay? Common in ticks and public health importance. So a lot of what we get into are actually more along this 3-host tick life cycle as far as that goes. So just some quick information on ticks. They are arachnids. They do have 8 legs. They are wingless with 2 body parts, the cephalothorax and the abdomen. There's about 850 species worldwide. There's about 80 species here in the United States. They attack dogs, cows, woodland animals, deer, things like that. You don't find a lot of ticks on cats, but I like to go by the old adage, never say never, because every now and then you'll see something, but they don't tend to like cats. Don't know if that's because cats do a lot of preening, cleaning, things like that, where, you know, some of these others do not. But I'm sure that has an effect as far as that goes. There's 2 basic forms of ticks. There's soft-shelled ticks. When you look at the soft-shelled tick, those mouth parts are not visible from above. The shell appears somewhat wrinkled, okay? And you usually find soft-shelled ticks on birds. Whereas the hard-shelled ticks, you know, the mouth parts are that you can view them from above. They're visible from above. That shell is hard, and you find these on mammals. So, you know, these are what I like to say the blood feeders, you know, a mammal blood feeder as far as that. Now, ticks mate while they are on a host. There you have a male and a female. They are mating, and they will mate when they are on that host. So you will have both male and female on there. As far as tick eggs are concerned, the pregnant female, she'll lay around 2,000 eggs in the spring of the year. So that probably happened the farther south you go, the earlier, say March or something like that. And then the further north you go, that's April, maybe early May, something like that. You know, there's not many of these eggs that survive. They actually dry out in a lot of cases before they get a blood meal. So the survival rate per se isn't that great, but they, you know, 2,000 eggs and you get a number of ticks and you get 2, and then, you know, the multiplication begins, so to speak. Now, that tick larvae that I talked about, it's also called seed tick, okay? Now that those eggs hatch in about 20 to 60 days, and out you come with this 6-legged larvae, and it's called a seed tick. So that's what's interesting with ticks. They start with 6, but then they gain 8, or they get 8 legs. They take a blood meal when a host is available. That's what they're out here for. They want that blood meal. They're very small, might go unnoticed. You notice the bottom picture of that. Those are seed ticks, very tiny, so that very easily can go unnoticed. You will see them in large numbers questing, and we'll talk about questing here in just a second. And then they attach to a host for about 3 to 8 days. They start taking in blood. They'll turn bluish in color and then drop off and hide and actually become almost dormant, okay, until they're ready for the next life stage. And that can take years, as we've seen. Ticks climb up, and you heard me say it a little earlier here. You know, they do what's called questing. And so they'll take a blade of grass or a stalk of grass, something like that. They climb, these little guys climb up to the edge, and then you'll see them kind of flailing those legs, and that's called questing, okay? And that questing, they're looking for, and they're detecting CO2. There's a Howler's organ, as you'll notice in this photo, and that actually helps them to detect CO2. I had somebody tell me in a conversation the other day that, oh, well, you know, with ticks, they're just waiting for somebody to walk by and they'll jump on them. Well, no, they don't jump on them. They're waiting for this host to come by and brush this area. They pick up the CO2, you know, in the air. Then as that host comes by, they brush against it, then they latch on. And that's how they move to a host. So it all has to do with questing and that Howler's organ and the detection of CO2. So where are the eyes on a tick? Has anybody ever thought about that? Do you think it's down there by the mouth parts? Where do you think it is? Well, the easy one to say is it's right there in those areas. And you got to think about it. Once they embed those mouth parts, they want the, you know, they would like, although they don't see great, they do want, you know, and would have the ability to see with their mouth parts embedded. And that's important to realize as far as that goes. So that's where the eyes are located. As far as the mouth parts are located, you know, there's a pair of palps. They help to detect that host. And then there's a pair of chelicera, which these chelicera are actually knife-like structures that cut the skin. And that helps, once that skin is cut, then the hypostome, the feeding tube, that actually goes into the host, and then it has barbs on it, like a harpoon, and then that helps to anchor the tick, and that helps it to feed. So they go, you know, the chelicera cut it, they go in with a hypostome, then those barbed sides lock on, so to speak, or latch on, and then, you know, that helps to anchor them. And then once they're anchored, they actually kind of cement themselves to the skin, and then they start to inject saliva, much like a mosquito, because they injecting saliva, that helps to make sure the blood doesn't coagulate, and that aids them in feeding. So that's a real quick rip through on ticks feeding as far as that goes. So, you know, and that's what you get when you know, when ticks, you see ticks feeding. And remember where the eyes are positioned and things like that. So at this point, you know, I think it's pretty evident what I need to talk about. And that's, you know, how do we get ticks off of folks? The correct way to remove a tick. Well, the thing to get, you know, to get and communicate to everyone is to remove a tick from your skin as soon as you notice it. All right. Use fine tip seed tweezers, firmly grasp the tick as close as you can to your skin. And then with a steady motion, pull the tick's body away, as I like to say, up from your skin, and then clean that wound out with soap and warm water. Avoid, if possible, of crushing the body. Don't be alarmed if the tick mouth parts remain in the skin, because once the mouth parts are removed from the rest of the tick body, or the body itself, then it can no longer transmit the disease. Now, don't have, you know, and when you get people talk about using petroleum jelly, hot matches, cigarettes, nail polish, other products to remove a tick, those aren't actually very good ways to do it. The most efficient and cleanest, so to speak, is the tweezer method. And that, you know, pass that along to everybody. You know, so where do you check for ticks? I like to say anywhere where it's tight, warm, moist, okay? Hairlines, inside, behind ears, back of neck, inside belly buttons, around the waist, especially, you know, waist on your clothes, things like that, armpits, groin, legs, behind the knees. And if you take a tick off and you have a question of whether that tick has a disease, by all means, tell your customers to bag it, put it in the freezer, and then at least you have a sample if there needs to be testing done. And that's one thing maybe we don't do as often as we should, is the proper way to remove a tick and then keep a tick. I know nobody wants a baggie of ticks in their freezer, but you know, you never know when it could be really, because otherwise we don't really have a sample to do any type of testing with. You know, ticks are the #1 in the United States as far as they vector more diseases than mosquitoes. So they are a big time vector of diseases. You get disease transmission on things like Lyme disease, ehrlichiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, babesiosis, and Powassan virus. I saw a write-up the other day on the Powassan virus. So it's already out there and about. Lyme disease. There's a big education effort going on this month, if I'm not mistaken, on Lyme disease. So these are big time things that are transmitted by ticks. Something to think about for you all also is timing with ticks. Remember, we talked about spring, summer, fall. These are the most active times for ticks. And if you look at this, this is a Lyme disease case month by month for, 2008 to 2019. And look where the onset. So late spring, starting in May, ramping up in May, and then heavy in June, July, and then declining as we go into fall. So, tick timing is something you need to think about. This is actually prime time this time of year, starting, as I like to say, mid-April, early April, mid-April, all the way into May. That's tick timing time. There's also other diseases, viral diseases such as Colorado tick fever, Heartland fever, bourbon virus, red meat allergies, things like that can be vectored by ticks. These are all things to keep in mind. I hope that bourbon virus doesn't mean that I would dislike my favorite beverage in bourbon, but that's why I try to do my best with ticks. So y'all think about that one. But anyway, all right. The ticks we encounter most are deer tick, Lone Star tick, American dog tick, and brown dog tick, Asian longhorn tick. Asian longhorn is the newest one, so to speak. As far as deer ticks, this is Lyme disease, key public health pest. Look at this slide. Take a look. Very small, size of a sesame seed. Areas of vegetation along paths and edges of habitat. If you take nothing else home out of this on ticks, please take that home. Mostly the eastern United States, and they're starting to pop up on the west coast. Mammalian blood, humans, etc. Tend to be a darker tick in a lot of cases, but you're going to see where you can't do things by color. You got to get it. You got to key it out. Application timing for you, for the nymphs, that's throughout the spring and summer. And then the adults are your targets during the fall and early spring. And that gives you a little, view of what their range is as far as that goes. This tick and this Lyme disease, this is something that, I know the people in the Northeast have really, really battled this for years, but this is starting to move farther west as far as that goes. The Lone Star tick, that white spot behind the head, that's big time. Wooded areas, thick underbrush, where white-tailed deer, which is the primary host of mature ticks, reside. Distributed eastern United States, but more common in the South. Yes, had a discussion a couple of weeks ago in Alabama with a gentleman about Lone Star ticks. Blood of white-tailed deer, they will utilize humans, other mammals. That distinct Lone Star marking behind the head. And then seasonal peaks in the population have been reported, Georgia, April, June, things like that. So like I said, spring is a prime time as far as that goes. This is, ehrlichiosis, as far as that goes, tularemia, Heartland virus, bourbon virus, things of that nature. That's associated with Lone Star tick as far as that goes. And there's your range of what you see with Lone Star. Next one we'll talk about is the American dog tick. Notice the coloration. It's that brown with that white shield marking behind the head. The male tends to be a little different, but it's going to have that color mixture, 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch. Wooded areas where dogs are present, can be inside homes or can be moved inside of homes, because a lot of times our dogs come inside the house as far as that goes. Now, throughout the United States, primarily blood of canines are their preferred diet. We talked about and they are also a public health pest as far as that goes. And they're outdoors through the warmer months and indoors year round. So notice you've got American dog tick, the range, let's say the oh my goodness, the Dakotas down into Texas and then east. But now we're starting to see it out here on the California coast and things of that nature. The brown dog tick, reddish brown in color, areas with heavy vegetation where animals congregate, pet resting areas. This one also primarily blood of canines, as far as that goes. And they can complete their life cycle indoors. So, when our pets move in, we run the risk. This one also is the public health pest. And there you've got the range on it, the whole United States. And then the new species just keep it coming, as I like to say. The Asian longhorn tick has popped up the last few years. Now, first reported in the United States in about 2017. By 2019, we've got about 11 states. And I do know in Indiana and probably now in Illinois, there were occurrences last year or identifications last year. So this is just going to continue to spread. Asian longhorn ticks, cattle, things like that. That gets moved, that gets transferred, then we run the risk. This is actually something that, this is a projection on, and notice that Illinois gets covered pretty heavy here with this. This is the projected areas that we think they're going to show up in and readily establish and be a problem. The interesting thing about the Lone Star tick is they're a little different from the mouth parts, a little different setup, as I like to say, as far as that goes. If you look at an Asian and you look at a Lone Star tick, they look somewhat similar, and they both prefer medium to large animals like cattle, deer, sheep, dogs, and things like that. But, the problem with the Asian Longhorn is she can reproduce without a mate. So that she can jump, she doesn't need a mate. She can lay up to that 2,000 eggs. She doesn't need the male to fertilize or anything like that. That's going to make these the biggest challenge that we've got. So life cycle can be completed in about 6 months. So this one is very quick as far as that goes. Most ticks will take 2 years, if not a little longer. This one is that one. Okay, this is that 1 year development. So that's going to be our biggest problem with that. So that's a quick rundown on the Asian Longhorn. There's a number of good references now popping up on Asian Longhorn by some of our universities and things like that. So I would suggest that you go online, do a little search, download some information. You need to be aware of this one because it's going. You may see this one sooner than later, so to speak. So trying to wrap this up and stay on time so everybody has a good day. We're going to roll into control. We're going to talk a little bit about flea control first, then we're going to kind of roll into tick control and flea control, especially outdoors. So here we go. The keys to effective flea control: do a good inspection. These days, IPM is such a position that we have and we now use, and we know that inspection is key to everything we do. We got to inspect, we got to identify. That helps us put together that control plan. Okay, so this flea control is no different. Tick control is no different. You need to understand that pyramid in fleas, okay, because you want to break that cycle of infestation. And to do that, we're going to utilize products like Gary talked about, IGRs and things like that give us a shot at eggs and larvae and adults, okay? So you're getting the most out of your product choices. We talked about material choices. That's huge and critical these days. You've got such a great array and tools in the toolbox. You can find good products, okay? Understand the formulation, understand the label, know the label. That's going to help you through it. And then thorough and complete application, both indoors and out. Especially, if you get the call with the indoor problem, then we've got to understand the outdoor connection too. I think customer education is huge, okay? We need to tell customers to vacuum and then throw the bag away or empty the container outside, okay, as far as that goes. And by the way, vacuuming, that straightens those carpet fibers, and this kind of goes back to what Gary was talking about. It's easier to pull that through a straight straw than a bent straw, so to speak. So thorough vacuuming, mop, wet mop tile, hardwood floors, things like that. Unless a pet rests on these areas, whether it's tile, hardwood floors, you're probably not going to see them there, because that pet resting and understanding the pet resting area, which you need to understand through customer communication, is where your population is going to be focused, okay, as far as that. Remove all items from floors and things like that so your treatment goes smoothly. I know it doesn't happen all the time, but you still got to tell them why, so to speak. And then replace, clean, treat pet bedding. That needs to be done. Treatment of the pet, that needs to be controlled. That needs to be part of the control plan as far as that goes, and communicated to your customer. Because it's a package, it's a protocol, it's a program, whatever you want to call it, okay? It's putting it all together, because if you leave one piece out or don't check one box in this, you will set yourself up more than likely for a treatment failure, and that's not what we want to do. Are we setting expectations correctly? Will all the fleas die immediately after treatment? No. Think about that pupil window. You have got to communicate to them that they're going to see fleas, adult fleas, for a couple of weeks because of that pupil window, and things of that nature. But it's important, that they understand treating the pets. That helps with this, okay? But then let our products do the work. We've got to let the products work, because I constantly talk to people that say, well, I got to call 7 to 14 days, and they said that it was terrible and all of this, and so I'm going to go back out and treat. No, let your products that you applied do their work. It's a matter of communicating to your customer. Set the expectations correctly from the beginning, and I think you'll find that you get a lot less callback problems as far as that goes. So in flea control, I call it the what and the where. Indoors, we're going to do a labeled adulticide and an IGR concentrate. I'm not going to beat on the IGRs. Gary did a great job with that. You understand now why that's effective. It's to give us a shot at that pyramid, a better shot at that pyramid. You can find these products as a tank mix. You can find these products as an RTU aerosol, as far as that goes. But understand that. Know the label. Same thing outdoors. A labeled adulticide and an IGR that will hold up to outdoor conditions, okay? And then if you, by any chance, there are on label or on animal products that are labeled, they need to be, mentioned as options. That's your personal choice or company choice. I get it. But, these days, as far as adulticides, you got pyrethroids, you got non-repellents, you got pyrethrins. You've even got some of what I call the green products now. But know the label. Make sure the label is what you're looking for. Then your IGRs, you talked about those, but you've got a number of ready-to-use aerosol products that contain an adulticide, maybe an adulticide, an IGR, and things like that. And then, if you must go back and do some kind of treatment, then understand that you might have some pyrethrin aerosols out there. We make CB80. Fleas are on the label. You can do a general treatment, and pyrethrin is not a lasting residual product, but it is a knockdown product. And that might need to be what you do to make a customer happy. So understand these, know your labels, indoor, outdoor, and that's going to give you the best thing. The best chance at doing control. And then tick management, as far as that goes, reduce the potential for bites. Talk to customers about mowing. Mow back, okay? Mow things back. And then apply tick repellents to clothing if people are going to be outside. That should be something you do. There's websites you can download off of. CDC.gov is great to get information, give to your customers. The better the information you give to them, the better your opportunity to be of service to them. And that's what we want to do. Treat your pets with treat the pest with preventative products. Know your labels. If they're going to spend time outdoors and they're going to hike and, spend time out in wooded areas, things like that, long pants, long sleeve shirts, those are things. Light colored clothing, that makes personal inspections easier. And then treatment timing, like we talked about earlier, is critical. Larvae and nymphs are moving active out there spring, summer. Adults, that's something for late summer and fall. And then think foliage, fencing, tall grasses. Because remember, they're going to go up, they're going to quest, they're trying to find a host, and so that's what I mean. Mow it back, mow it down. Don't give them that opportunity. The other thing about ticks, they're going to be in these areas: undisturbed, wind protected, dark, moist, cool. All right. That's where they're going to be. That's their preferred habitats. So keep that in mind. And then look at what you're dealing with. And I don't care if this happens to be with ticks, but I could put one up here about fleas. Understand your zones, okay? That forested area, that's a tick zone. That wood chip barrier area, okay? That's that transition area. That's right there. So, we want to make sure we do applications to areas that are going to give us the most effect. And that's what we're doing. Same thing with fleas, okay? Or let me throw fleas in there real quick. I constantly get people that say they're going to treat the yard for fleas. Let me ask you something. Did you ask the customer where the pets rest if the pets are outdoors? I don't bet you it's right in the middle of the yard, because I bet the pets are resting around shaded tree areas, maybe in perimeters that are shaded and things like that. Where are flea populations going to be? Where your pets rest. So keep those things in mind, okay? And be proactive with it. This is IPM, okay? IPM on both of these. My biggest problem I see with our folks, our industry is we don't talk about it enough. We let other people dictate to us. We need to be the ones to talk about it. And then best management practices. You've got a number of information for yourself. Download these. Use them. Understand your pests. Understand where you can treat. All of that information is here. Timing, things like that. What type of application you want to make, liquid, granular, whatever it is. Okay. These are things that are available. And then I didn't have it in here, but I do want to bring it up real quick. People like ZoeCon, the folks that Gary worked for, they've got a tremendous little homeowner handout for flea control. They'll send them to you. Use them. Utilize them. Do customers always look at them? No. But you're trying to communicate with your customers and do a good job. And that's just an extension of your service. Good information. So let's wrap this up. Proper coverage is important. Indoors, outdoors, okay? Use higher rates and volume of water, like Gary talked about, where necessary to penetrate into certain areas. You're given that flexibility on your labels. Utilize it, okay? Don't make everything cookie cutter. Sometimes we've got, like Gary said, we've got to make good decisions, okay, about what's going to do the best job for us. Proper product selection is critical, all right? Know your labels. If you have label questions, contact your distributor, contact manufacturers, all of us, okay? That's why we're out here. Make good decisions and then do good applications, thorough applications. I don't get calls on problems on thorough applications. I get calls where people cheat a little. And that's, I can just tell you that. So, remember those things when you're putting a program together. I'd strongly suggest you be program based on these for control on these pests, and I think it will greatly help. So I'm going to wrap this up. I like to end with this slide. I think it's hugely important that we remember this, okay, because sometimes we get busy and we forget. Pesticide application is not the service. It can be part of the service. I'm not going to argue with that. That's not my argument, but it is not the service. The service is your knowledge. That's why you train. okay, is to be able to do better. And your knowledge is the service, and that's what you have to communicate to your customers. When they call you, they're buying your service is your knowledge on how to solve their problem. So with that, I'm going to say questions, discussions. I want to thank IPCA once again for allowing me to help them with this. Really enjoyed it. I hope everybody got something out of it. And with that, I'm pretty much done.
All right. So if anybody has any questions, now is a great time to submit those. We do have one question in right now that I'll throw out to you. We got a couple minutes left for questions here. The question here is, in your opinion, as it relates to flea and tick control, how do you feel about efforts being directed to the outside of the home for sanitation purposes? So things like landscape management. How important is that as a role in helping to manage both fleas and ticks?
I'm that dude. I'm that dude that I want a clear zone. And I'll explain what I call clear zone. I want a foot to 18 inches between any vegetation and the structure. So with that being said, I hope you understand what I'm getting at in that that's hugely important. Understand, especially it doesn't matter if it's flea, if it's tick or whatever. Understand what contributes, where are these pets going to rest? And then are there contributing factors, even going down, so to speak, to the vegetation and the landscape itself? Can we do things in these areas to make it better? Yes, by all means. I think that's hugely important. So I'll quit babbling on that one.
No, that's absolutely perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, anything else?
Yeah. So here's another question. And, you touched on this a bit in terms of the complexities that are involved with the biology of both fleas and ticks. Do you have a recommended, I know it's going to be kind of an opinion-based question, but for you, with your experience, what would you recommend as a duration to wait after an initial treatment for a retreatment to be scheduled? And how would that differ between fleas and ticks?
Well, label's going to dictate, okay? But I can tell you that someone calling you, let's say it's a tick application indoors, okay? Just as an example. This is my opinion as far as that goes. We do the initial service. We've done it pretty good. I don't care if we tank mix, we use an RTU product, whatever it is. We feel good. We got pretty good coverage. Lord, I'll even go so far as they listened to us and got things out from under the bed. And so we treated those areas. We really focused on our treatment areas where the pets rest with our conversation with our customer, things like that. So, I mean, we're really, we feel good about it. We're always going to have to go back to what's on that label. You've got some labels that allow you to come in after 7 days. It may be 14 days. It may be 21 days. Whatever it is, we're going to have to adhere to that. But unless even when they vacuum, they're not going to appreciably reduce the effectiveness of our products we've applied. Now, if they came in and quote clean the carpets, oh yeah, it's gone. Okay. But we have to allow the product to work. And that's what I hope I really pushed on. We get those phone calls at 7 to 14 days. Oh my gosh, they're worse than they were in the beginning. Well, it's, did we communicate correctly? And that's my big focus on that one. You've got to go with what's on the label as far as a retreatment is concerned. But, Gary's presentation, as far as IGRs are concerned, those products are there for months. And they only egg, not only larvae, okay, but we know adults. So, let the products do it. Communicate to your customer up front. Set the expectations correctly. So I hope that answered the question.
No, that was perfect. That was, you knocked it out of the park. All right, so we got 2 minutes left here, so we'll do a rapid fire for our last question. It's a relatively straightforward one. So in terms of fleas and ticks and their relationship with the host, once the host dies, do they leave the host or do they remain with the host?
Oh, they're going to leave the host. They're going to leave the host. Now, ticks, I don't know as much about ticks from that aspect as I do about fleas, but we've seen with fleas, this, and people may have experienced this, where if you remove a wild animal, all of a sudden the fleas migrate to another area to find a host. Okay. So I know on that one, I would bet you that the tick may feed a little longer, but they're also going to find it because they're going to want the best food source possible. So how's that? I tell you what, you're going to make me find out about ticks because that one's kind of got me stumped. But I have I've got my thoughts on that, but I'll have to A-OK it. But
there you go.
that's what I've got.